Hey there. So you caught me. I always do my little Reebok move when the intro music comes on. We find joy where we can. Oh dear, I'm already lagging. That's okay. Oh, there we go. We're caught up. So, as I was saying, we find our joy where we can. We find our happiness where we can. And we find our tonight's subject of jewel weed where we can. I just wanted to say that I really enjoy the time we spend together in this space. This is a space where we can talk about green, about magic, about spirit, about all manner of things that are in this earth and that we here as stewards of the earth can appreciate and experience together. It is beyond emotion, it is beyond thought, it's beyond fear of the unknown, because we know here in this space that we're curious and we can get to know things, and we can get to know plants, and we can get to know their magical properties, their spiritual properties, their uses, and their meanings. And one of the things I have found in my 54 years on this earth, oop, I don't want to say that too loud, is that there will be times when you are disappointed or you are suffering what seems to be an insurmountable setback or some painful reality. And when this happens, it can be in the form of emotional upset, it can be in the form of physical distress. And it is important to know where to seek out the balms, where to seek out the healing, the not necessarily a panacea, but something that will give you a way to make it through, to make it less painful, to heal the parts that are itchy or are painful, to heal the bruises, to make you feel better when you are bloated with sadness or even hatred of others or of yourself or things like that. You need to know where to find those healing balms to help purge that out of you. Now, tonight's episode is about jewel weed, and most of you know, if you know about jewel weed, you're thinking about poison ivy or poison oak, because those are basically tied to jewel weed, because while we have a reaction to the chemical inside of those particular poison plants topically, we also know that jewelweed has the, I don't want to say cure, but the treatment to the negative effects of that. In other words, if you fall into a patch of poison ivy or poison oak, you will be able to use the jewelweed to help soothe it. I have found that something else is curious. It seems that in nature, that in Michigan that I have found, it seems like jewelweed will grow by itself, but it also seems that when there's a patch of poison ivy, jewelweed is not far behind. And I think there's a lesson in that. I used to do something called nature teachings, and I think there's a teaching in that. Um, when there's pain, when there's trouble, when there's agitation or irritation, something poisonous, I think the teaching is that there's always something nearby if we seek it out that can offer relief, that can offer healing or treatment. And in this case, jewelweed would be the teaching. It would be you need to look with your eyes and see. Sometimes it's not just these two eyes right here. Sometimes it's somewhere else, but let's think about it. We have become somewhat less complacent in believing that every poison has a cure and every place is poison free. And life doesn't work that way. Sometimes life sneaks up on you and it says, well, you thought you were past the patch of poison ivy. And then all of a sudden you look all around and you see it was on the trees all around you. You were looking down and didn't look to the sides. But if you continue to look, more than likely, jewelweed is there. And before we get into the properties of jewelweed and how it works for us and magically how it can work for you, I'd like for you to work your fingers on a pen or a pencil and take down a note of these other great shows here on this network. Well, I thought we were going to have a commercial, but that's okay. That's all right. That's okay. Sometimes life happens. All right. So the other shows are on this network. You'll see them. You'll see the feed, the trailer. But let's get to jewelweed and what it does for us and what it can help us with magically and mundanely. If we again are struck by having a negative encounter, topical encounter with uh, poison ivy, poison oak, poison sumac. By the way, those aren't the only things that can give you a topical problem as far as a plant, but those are the most common. You often will find jewelweed, and the way that you would get the jewelweed to work for you is you would strip it down, you would crush it, you would cut the leaves because what you need is inside. You need that liquid inside. You know, sometimes it's almost like it's crying when you cut it open and the sap comes out. Kind of like how when you're going through a rough shock and a rough time, sometimes, people are like, oh, I don't want to cry, but you need to cry in order for that healing to take place. You know, putting that liquid on there is how you do the healing. That's how you treat that. Well, I shouldn't tell you anything that sounds like medical advice because remember, I'm not a registered naturopath. I'm not a registered herbalist. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nurse. But I can tell you about folk remedies, and that's one of the things you can do. Did you also know, though, that, and this is obviously, refrigeration is a wonderful, wonderful thing. You can take jewel weed and cut it up and put it in the freezer, and you don't lose any of the enzymes that work there to help you. I mean, who knows how long it could keep? It could keep, till you need it. You freeze it for 4 weeks or for 4 years. And you use the cure when you get an opportunity in 4 weeks or in 4 years. And you try to heal yourself. But another thing it can do is it can help bruises. The seeds are often used to help with pain in childbirth. But now listen, there are different varieties of jewelweed. So you need to make sure that you talk to someone who knows what they're talking about before you just stick those seeds in your mouth. Because what have we learned? What do we always talk about? Don't just put things in your mouth. Don't do that. Um, but once you know what you're doing, that's different. There's different kinds of jewelweed, but two of the ones that grow mostly here in Michigan is that regular jewelweed, and then there's that woodland jewelweed. One is spotted and one is woodland. And the spotted one likes the sun a little bit more than the woodland. But both of them have some height on them. They're not short little shrubs. I mean, I've seen them be as low as 2 feet, but generally they're about 3 to 4 feet. One I thought was almost 4.5 feet because it was kind of high, but and it grows near damp areas. One place you can find jewelweed really easily is near a metro park, Huron Clinton Metro Parks, near the water. Specifically, there's some. Well, wait a minute, I'm not telling you that. Go out there and pick it all up. No, but I'll tell you it's in the Huron Clinton Metro Park system. Put it that way. But and it's a beautiful plant. The thing about it is, if you notice about the jewel weed, people always say, "Oh, it's so pretty. It's like pretty red or yellow jewels, and that's why it's jewel weed." Don't make stuff up. That's not why it's called that. If you look at the leaves, when the water is on them from the rain or whatever, it beads up. If you put the leaves underwater and move them around, they look silvery. But those bubbles of water on the leaf, or sometimes little air bubbles will gather on the leaf under the water, they glisten like little jewels. That's why it's jewel weed. Has nothing to do with the orange and the yellow. You know, just stop. Just don't let people tell you things that aren't true. You know, that goes around. You know, people can sometimes be misled by things that sound right, and then they wind up being deceived for years before they get, any help from that. But that's why it's called jewelweed. Now, the curious thing about jewelweed too, about the seed pods, is jewelweed pops off. It pops off. Because sometimes, it's called touch me not. Because, if you touch it when the pods are ready, it'll pow, it'll pop off. People need to be careful about how they, brush against people or brush against plants because you never know when something's ready to pop off. So it's important to focus on the healing and balming part of that and not the popping part. Don't pop off. So let's talk about magically what it can also do. You know, I know that many people say, oh, jewelry is about transformation and it's about, the potential of hope. And it's about this, and it's about that, and it's got male and female flowers. It's about keeping things to yourself because some of the flowers are big and showy, and then the other flowers are not because the second set of flowers are smaller and they have less genetic diversity. But in this way, it can make sure that, at least part of it survives. But I'm going to point out that also jewelweed has a quality of defensive magic and hex breaking. And part of that is not just because of the popping off of the seeds, but it is partially um, related to that. I'm not going to really get into that here. Some things I can get into, some things I can't get into. But just you explore it, meditate on it, see if it resonates with you, if it works for you. But I would also look at the fact that there's some orange and yellow in there, and it grows near water. So take of that what you will, um, as far as that how that might go for your personal practice. I practice DTR, which is diasporic traditional religions. And I also practice folk magic. So, and yes, I do practice a little bit of hoodoo, but guess what? I don't teach you hoodoo. I teach you folk magic. Yeah. But I would say that it's worth looking into working jewel weed. I think we've talked about jewel weed before. I'm almost certain. It just seems like today, for some reason, we needed to talk about a healing herb again. Maybe make yourself a magical pouch today if you have some dried jewel weed, or look for it next year, or buy some balm online or at your local shop. It's very important to support your local shops because you might need to meet someone there and be able to talk freely. You may make, you know, associations, plans, thoughts for the new year, things you want to accomplish, not just for months, but for years of work that you could do to uh, to make the world a better place. This is just a suggestion, but I'll see you here next time on Explorations in Curious Herbalism.